So with Cardano, one, yeah, people were very nice, like very welcoming of Ergo being there. It was kind of interesting. Some people were a little weird, but the vast majority, 95% were super cool, super interested in the project, and really wanted it to come to Cardano. And I heard Charles' speech, and then I started thinking about one of the things I'm passionate about, which is longevity. We talked about that, right? The fact that you can take your character with you to other games, maybe, and all sorts of cool stuff that could happen if we adopted this mindset. And longevity, and you'll hear actually at the White House right now, people are talking with leadership in the US about blockchain regulation and stuff. And one of the things they always talk about is how, like, we never want a single point of failure. I started thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, everyone's like only using one blockchain, but why? Why would you do that? Like that, like and especially if they're similar, because to the project, all that means is you have two groups that could use your game. And then if one blockchain does happen to just have a catastrophic failure, which is rare, but could happen, and we've seen it, you still have another block. You have another database. It's almost like if you have Firebase and Amazon Web Services. Like if Firebase crashes, I lose all your user data. I lose your email and I lose your username. That kind of sucks, right? Like, but instead we could have two databases that manage the game. So that's it. It just makes sense technically. It makes sense monetarily, and it honestly isn't that much harder to do. So it just seems like honestly a good idea. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I think you being on Ergo, you're kind of foolproofing it already. And then with the Cardano, you're able to take almost like if your project was taking advantage of the Rosen Bridge, you're harnessing the security of Ergo,
Yeah.
knowing that it's completely open source, knowing that the token allocations do not run on proof of stake,
Yep.
which has it opens up some interpretations on
Hmm.
the incentives and all those
Yep.
things that eToro USA knocked off ADA or whatever off of their offerings, for example, because of the
Yep.
5% back or the 4% back. So
Yeah.
anyway, again, gray areas. I don't personally agree with it, but you never
Yeah.
know. Being in the US, you and I, we have no idea what our
No idea.
leadership will do. No
No
idea.
idea.
We're at the
Mm.
mercy of that. But with
Yep.
Ergo, you're pretty much on a Bitcoin 2.0 that
Yep.
you're safeguarding it. And then with the Cardano side, if Blitz, I would love to see it catch fire because if
Hmm.
it did, it would be it is a net positive for everybody.
Everybody.
uh,
Yep.
Ergo would get more exposure.
Yep.
More Cardano people would be joining our community without really
Yep.
knowing that they're joining our
Nope.
community. You would get the cross chain compatibility down
Yep.
packed, and you would open up to a wider audience to buy your packs for
Yeah. Right.
$5 in ADA. Five
Yep.
dollars in ERG. A lot of people like to hodl their ERG first and
Yeah.
foremost. They think it's
Right.
a BTC, so I'm not going to give up
Yeah.
anything. I'm hodling.
Right. Right.
But the ADA, they throw it around like if it
Yeah.
was confetti. Buy
Hmm.
NFTs of apes and things like that for a
Yeah.
thousand ADA.
$1,000. Yeah. Or
Who
1,000. Yeah.
cares?
10,000 ADA sometimes.
So
Right.
the,
Like.
the the amount of accessibility that would come from that is that people could just buy your packs based off of their staking rewards as
Yeah,
well. They
man.
wouldn't actually have to pay anything extra.
Nope.
So I think that's really exciting. Is there
Yeah.
are there any other main features about the game that, for example, you can share? I try to touch on basically off the top of my head things that I would ask about this and
Yeah.
general questions. Oh wait, I do have a few.
Sure.
How, I mean, how do you determine the strength and the weaknesses of cards? How do you determine like the rules about the game? How many cards would there be on the platform? Like if you're playing with me right now the game,
Yeah.
would I have five cards in front of me? Would I flip one over? How
Yeah.
how do card
How's it
games in
play?
general? How do you win? How do you lose? How do you play? How do you keep people interested in playing again too?
Yeah, man. Those are all good questions. You ask a lot, so I'm going to sort of just walk through them. When it comes to a card game, a lot of competitive players and even casual players are sort of put off by card games because there's an RNG aspect to it a lot of times. So, you could draw a few bad cards and it really throws you off. So in Blitz, at least the primary game mode is going to be way different than any other card game you've ever played. In that you're going to have access to basically your entire deck from the start of the match. So there will be like a little left-hand window, and you'll see all your cards that you put in your deck, probably like upwards of 30 cards total. And as the game goes on, you defeat enemy cards, you maybe defeat some NPCs on the board, which is kind of unique too to Blitz. You'll gain more resources, almost like a MOBA if you picture League of Legends or Dota, but in card format. So then you defeat cards, you get resources, you buy more cards. And then eventually you can afford the better cards in your deck and you start playing them instead. And then what happens, because the name of Blitz actually comes from chess. So it's a 3-2 style chess match, which means you have 3 minutes of time on the clock. And every time you make a move, you get 2 seconds back. So it incentivizes quick gameplay. Because of course, the more time you have, the more decision-making that you have left in the bank. And you'll also get more resources the faster you move. So this is really cool, right? This is kind of cool. And if people get I get excited because this is the kind of shit that I like. So what that means is like the faster and more accurate I can move, the more resources I can get. Therefore, the more and stronger cards I can play to try to like get that quick, like competitive, vibey, like a fresh perspective on card games, right? Because card games today are very slow oftentimes. You have to wait, 2 minutes for somebody to make a move. And that's because people have to draw from a deck often. And it just takes time to do all that if you think about it. But if you just start thinking of it a little differently, like, okay, what if we didn't have a deck? Again, Blitz could always have a deck in a different game mode, but at least in the primary game mode, the competitive game mode, that's how we do it, right? And we see what happens, like fast, action-oriented, competitive gameplay where skill and knowledge of your cards matter more than the cards that you draw. So that's very compelling for some people. It's very compelling for gamers specifically, right? People like that idea. Now, whether it works is yet to be seen. Like we have to try it, and I'm a pessimist, so we have to see how it plays. Now, the balance, you talked about balance. The balance of a lot of these cards, thankfully, you don't have to reinvent the wheel too much. So I keep a spreadsheet like of all original Hearthstone cards' abilities and their attributes and which ones people liked and which ones people didn't. Now, of course, with Blitz, there's experience and there's gold and there's health and there's attack. So there's a few more attributes on each card. There's 4 compared to some of the simpler games that only have 2. So that adds a little bit of nuance there. But all very balanceable given you played enough, right? So once, I'll probably just come up with some what I feel like are reasonable numbers for these things, like probably some linear curve based on the amount of resources the cards cost versus how strong they are. And start with that. But, abilities can matter a lot. So you might have one card that falls outside of that line a little bit. Maybe you need to bring it back down to make it, more on that linear curve. But those are all very fundamental and actually YouTube searchable card design principles. So like some Hearthstone guys made awesome videos on all that. And they explain the thought process, but that's mine. So let's following the things that we know work because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel when it comes to that. But it does aim to re-energize the gameplay itself.
Yeah, wow. What does a winner of a match stand to gain from winning that match? What type of, if you could talk about I don't know if there are economic incentives to winning the game, or if it is the mere frustration or disappointment of losing a game that forces somebody to kind of draw from the pile again and pay that extra 5 and get back into the game and try to get that.
Yeah. So we when I think of what I care about in video games, winning or losing, I like to see progression. So you'll have, a level, and you'll have, um, probably like Overwatch style levels actually, where whether you win or lose, you go up a star, and maybe you get a new frame. So something to indicate how much time you put in to the game. So that'll be there whether you win or lose. On the benefit side of it, this can either be on the blockchain or not. Like, it goes back to our discussion, right? Like, could I give out more free to play cards if you perform really well? Absolutely. So maybe at the end of each season, um, you unlock a few free to play cards, right? Because you played, and now you get these really cool cards that you have to play the game to unlock. So that's a really good way to incentivize people playing. You could also go the route that Gods Unchained went, which is with their own internal currency. So it's called Gods. Blitz would just be called Blitz or something. But you got to be careful with that currency, right? You have to be careful with it because it's abused. It's abused because then it turns into what we were describing, which is people just will make all these bots and just start Blitz matches and run them, right? They'll just run them because they'll accumulate matches and get currency. So in Blitz, what I would like to see, if we can figure out how to get around some of that stuff, is like, let's say you open 50 packs because you just love opening Blitz cards and you get all these extra cards. And in Blitz, like, you don't really need that many extra cards because it's like you have your whole deck available to you. It doesn't really matter how many extras you have. What I would like, instead of you having to go and sell that card to somebody, I would just like a standing smart contract that you send that token to, and it gives you some set amount of Blitz tokens. So the benefit of that is the Blitz tokens just end up being purely utility. They'll probably have some set value, but almost like a stable coin in some ways, because you'll always, like, the value of the Blitz token will be tied to the card, and the card's amount will never change. So you can always expect to get 25 Blitz tokens for Margot or whatever. That's a really interesting concept too that I don't want to get too far into because honestly I haven't thought it through as much as some of this other stuff. But at the end of the day, what I would really like is again to empower the player. So then, like, imagine this: you buy 50 packs, you want to only keep 20 cards. I do that with Pokemon all the time. The rest of them just sit in my fucking basement. They're just in my basement. I don't even look at them. But what if instead I could take that card and exchange them back into tokens, and then I could go buy new cards, or I could buy more packs? That's a beautiful thing. That would be a beautiful way to empower the player and the people who are investing in the game, because then it could go right back into the game. Like with my Pokemon cards, they're going to rot in the basement until I die, right? Like those Pokemon cards that are worthless, they're just some energy capsule, worthless. They'll never go anywhere. And that's kind of sad. That's kind of sad, right? So like we can do better than that with the blockchain. We can do better than that if it's done right.
Right. Yeah, you might need like an economist on your team in
Yeah.
order to hash
Yeah.
this out. Because
That's a
it really
tough one.
becomes, yeah, it becomes its own marketplace. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it would be difficult to think about the gameplay, to think about
Yeah.
the mechanics of the blockchain,
Yeah.
also the marketplace that will develop, and to make it not easily exploitable
Right.
by rapid
Right.
progression or
That's
other
the
type of
key.
creative. Yeah,
Hmm.
and it'll require a bit of of um, of test stress
Hmm.
testing in order to see what that will be like.
And
You
we have
know,
examples. The good news is we have
right?
examples. So like RuneScape, people only tend to think of like games in their own buckets. RuneScape, MMO, very old. But they have a crazy in-game economy. Like ridiculous. It's its own stock market. Literally, it's its own stock market, right?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, right? Like they have a grain exchange. You can sell and buy items. You can trade with players. The items have some value in gold, and gold you can sell for real money online. So like the gold itself has a USD value to it. So what's funny is, where everyone's trying to like reinvent the wheel with all these weird social media blurbs, but RuneScape's done this shit for over 20 years. Over 20 years. Like it has done exactly what I'm describing and we're talking about. Is they've built a successful and relatively stable in-game economy for way bigger complexity than Blitz, frankly. I mean, they have tens of thousands of items. Blitz has like 150, right? Like we can figure it out, right? We can figure it out. But people forget that. They forget that we've already done these things. It's not, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
How about for user participation down the line? Will there be some sort of governance aspect, at least when it comes to decision making and what people would like to see for future series, or any
Mm-hmm.
sort of uh, mechanics that they're like, hey, you're a little top
Yeah.
heavy over here
Yeah. Yeah.
versus,
Yeah. Very good question, man. I'm glad you're into this enough to ask these questions. So that is, I would say, the very final piece of what blockchain can do to help a little bit here. And I normally don't bring it up because it is like one level of complexity, but I think we built up to it enough at this point to get to it. So governance is a beautiful aspect of the blockchain. And governance really just, or for folks, if they're watching, governance is just a way for you to vote on something while validating you have eligibility to vote on it. So it's almost like if you went to a voting booth and you showed your driver's license, they'd allow you to vote if you're 18 years or older. It's a similar idea with a blockchain, a little different, but similar. It's like with Blitz, I have this really good idea, I think, because we're not using an NFT model that we can do. So imagine this. Imagine, because again, it's just a token. I can show you whatever I want for Margot. There'll probably be something in the metadata about that it's Margot, that she's in the Masquerade clans, but like her game attributes and stuff, that's all for us to decide as a team, as a group. So what we can do is hold votes, right? So I could show the stats and I could say, 70% of games where Margot is played, she wins. And this is why we think she's doing that. Like her health is too high and her ability is too strong. So here's three ways that we think we could balance Margot. And then you could vote. And we could track that voting based on governance. So if you've played a lot of Blitz games, or you have a lot of cards, or you have a lot of Blitz tokens, some amalgamation of the three to make it fair, you get to vote. And that vote matters, right? Like your vote would matter. And then you'd see the confirmed decision. It's a little more centralized, right? Like it would be me making the adjustments or our team, but that's what you have to give up to be able to balance the game and make it survive. That's the problem with NFT games is Gods Unchained, biggest NFT card game that's ever released monetarily that I know of. And their first set was strictly NFTs. So they already had the damn card abilities set. And you can't really change them easily because then when you cross compare the NFT image to the game image, they would be different. And people would be like, what the heck is going on? Like I paid this much money for this card, and now it doesn't look like that in the game. So with Blitz, like when you look at the image, it's just going to be basically Margot in her card frame with her assigned rarity, maybe a little first edition symbol. It'll have her name and her clan, but everything else will just be general information, like a description of Margot. Margot is the leader of the Masquerades, blah 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 blah. And then when you look at Margot in the game, she'll have her numbers, right? Because again, all I care about is the ID, and then I can show you whatever I want to show you. And that's what makes it able to go to different games. Is now you can put Margot in your fighting game, right? You can just say, if you own one Blitz Margot card, you unlock Margot in my fighting game. And me at the Blitz side would be like, yes, that is our IP, but because you're referencing our original token, you get to use whatever you want. So like, have fun, right? Like, do whatever you need to
Right.
do. I really think it's a beautiful concept that nobody has really leveraged yet to the extent that it could be.
Yeah, I think that vision is very much untapped. and we can talk for hours about
Yeah,
how it
man.
should be conceived, and it has to be done responsibly. And obviously, uh, when you are looking for profit games, you don't find that being the first and foremost attribute. It
Yep.
is more about how can you harvest ETH out of this game,
Right.
and then we'll try to work out if the gameplay is bearable enough for you to do so.
Yep.
And yeah, I would agree with you. It's a very primitive version of what could be,
What could be, right? Yeah,
what
we
could
just
be if people put
sad.
enough thought into it. And then also taking away from kind of the big game companies that honestly they probably sit in a boardroom meeting and say, how can we
Yeah.
exploit this to
Yep.
make more money? Not necessarily enhance the game in any tangible way, but how can we use this and leverage this to make more? Make it free to play. Now you got NFTs, and we're on the, I don't know, Solana blockchain.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
it
Yep.
won't change a whole lot, but when you pursue it from the ground up in the way that you and your team
Hmm.
are creating it, I think it has an infinite amount of potential for sure.
Thanks, man.
And yeah, and I think it could be economically sustainable as well,
Right.
and balance out a lot with the actual user base. And
Yeah.
I think it could be addictive, so be careful.
Yeah. Right. People. I love opening cards. Like, like I'm gonna want to open my packs, and I have to be careful because of legal issues with that. Like, I want to open some Blitz cards too.
Sure,
Like,
sure.
but it's I want people to have fun. Like, at the end of the day, my only goal monetarily is to make back my investment. Like, candidly, right out the gate, if I could do that and also make a pretty cool game, I would consider that like a checkbox on my life list, right? Like, made a successful video game. And anything after that monetarily would just be extra that I'm not expecting. So, that's also I think a different mindset than a big company, right? And often a lot of these NFT money grab games, that's their only motivation. It's nothing else, right?
Yeah.
And I know I can't really prove what I'm saying, but I hope over time people begin to trust that. I will truly. It's like on my LinkedIn, my professional LinkedIn profile, right? I'm trying to make it legitimate, and I mean it when I say it. Like, it really is a secondary objective at this point. I've already sunk like over 20,000 into it, so at this point, it's getting done, right? Like, it's getting done, whether we like it or not. So, anything like that would put me over the moon, man. I'd be floored. So
One final point that you touched on,
yeah,
and it could be the big elephant in the room, legalities.
yeah.
What could you share about that before we go? I think the US is not that great, in my opinion, for fostering innovation in a safe
Mm,
way. They kind of hit everything with a blunt object in the name of
yeah,
safety, and then try to roll back whatever you know damage they did. That is my opinion anyway. I don't I it's like shoot first and then ask questions later. How did we kill
yeah.
this while other countries led the way with this type of innovation that the blockchain and cryptocurrencies in general could give? But do you have any insight on that? I'm sure you've thought about it. You don't want to be deemed some sort of money launderer or criminal or
Right.
any of these other tired labels that
Yep.
people are given when governments don't understand the type of innovation coming from within.
Yeah. And that is a good question to end on. Certainly agree. At this point, man, I mean, that's sort of one of the things I'm trying to help with, is changing that perception. And unfortunately, for all of us that are invested in blockchains, from a monetary standpoint or just from a technology standpoint, until we break away from the money grabbing schemes that are unfortunately out there, like that's a reality. You're going to have lawmakers that always point to that as examples for why this isn't a good thing. And they're not, in some cases, they're not that wrong, right? Like it's hard to argue and say, well, that's a one-off when it happens 10 times a month, or whatever, 1,000 times a month. So like, first and foremost, we as a community, blockchain as a whole, have to start doing a little better, right? Like we got to start thinking more ethically, and proving, not just saying, but proving, which is one of the reason I like Ergo so much, that we're doing things the right way, where we're approaching it from an ethical and principled standpoint. Now with the US, my gut is there will be a middle ground reached. I don't think the blockchain enthusiasts will be thrilled with it. And I don't think the regulators will be thrilled with it. Right.
Yeah.
But there's probably going to be a middle ground somewhere. I just don't think the problem is nobody really understands. You have people that really understand it, and you have people that don't understand it at all. And oftentimes there's a mix of these people making the decisions. And until everybody finds it like very accessible, like the internet, like you can kind of understand what power the internet has, until you really understand what power the blockchain has, the decisions are kind of going to be all over the place, I think. Like they're just not going to be good until we get there. So we just have to do better. Like, and I actually think it starts with the blockchain, man. Like it starts with people like you and me. Like we have to just keep making content and not rug pulling, and like just be like decent people, like be decent people. And then all of a sudden it'll turn into something like the internet, where it's a little more accessible and people understand it a little more, and then they can make better decisions about it.
Right. Yeah. Be the change you want to see in the industry, huh? I mean,
Yep.
that is really what it comes down to. Without any further ado,
Yeah, man.
I look forward personally to seeing what comes out of this project over time. I know it will be many iterations and it will only gradually improve. Be on the lookout for that if you're in the Ergo community. There are a few games coming out. This is probably one of the most robust sounding ones, and I think it will be a net positive for everybody in the community and in the Cardano community and for the industry in general. This is what we need to see. We're in the early days of the internet with in terms of what blockchain can do. So without any further ado, Mick, thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing Blitz, the trading card game. And if you're interested in more, again, please check the description. I'll put everything I can grab in there. So thank you so much again for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you all.